I'm going to tell you about the deep bond between my best friend, Mark the Great Dane. That day, the house was quiet. My parents were out of town and it was just Mark and me. But this calm was only a superficial silence. Because that day, the relationship between Mark and me was by no means calm. This is the story of our deep connection, the complex emotions and the process of growing up. That day, the house was very quiet. Mom and Dad were out somewhere, so only Mark and I were there. I'd been lying on the couch for ages, staring indifferently at the TV screen on which a comedy was playing. The situation around was so quiet that I wouldn't really care about anything more than what flashed before my eyes. In one flash, Mark stood up, eyes in a strangely heightened state of sparkle, like the comprehension of something was a vital accident. He darted, mute to the world of explanations, to the main door. I heard a click softly quietly. Mark had locked the door, slowly turning round, his eyes heavier with unnameable vigor, then again moving fast to come near me. Before I could realize what was going on, Mark jumped on me, attacking, not even giving me a chance to react. Space seemed choked. Time seemed to stand still. I was numb, shocked, and then all happened in that whirlwind of a second that swept away all boundaries. What followed, I knew, was going to change my life forever. Hello, I'm Emma, a girl who just turned 18, living happily with her small family. As the only child, I receive lots of love and care from my parents. They always give me the best things and support my personal interests. Among those interests, raising pets, especially lovely dogs, is my greatest passion. My love affair with dogs started when I was 18 years old. At the time, I watched mostly animal TV shows, and images of faithful, cute dogs always caught my eye. I begged my parents for a long time to get me a dog. Finally, one fine day, my parents agreed and took me to the stable to choose a four-legged friend as a mate. As I entered the kennel, I was overwhelmed by the calm dogs there, but out of all of them, there was one particular dog that immediately caught my eye. He had silky fur, gentle eyes, and an impressively long body. Although the Great Dane is known for being a large dog, as a puppy he was very cute and innocent. From the first look, I felt a special connection to this dog. I didn't hesitate to choose him as my new friend. At first, my parents were quite surprised by my choice. They were concerned that a dog the size of a Great Dane might be difficult to handle, but with my worth and love for this dog, I believed it. We took him home and named him Mark. My first few days with Mark were truly a memorable experience. He was naughty and loved. Mark was very intelligent and quickly learned basic commands like sit, stand and wait. From taking a walk in the park to enjoying some quiet time, we became close friends as we were friends every moment. As time passes, Mark grew up quickly. He turned into a big dog, tall but still gentle and honest. Mark is not only a pet, but also an important member of the family. Whenever I feel sad or stressed, Mark will always comfort me with his gentle eyes and adorable licks. To me, Mark is not just a dog. He is a friend, a companion, and a testament to his unconditional love for humans and animals. Thanks to Mark, I have learned to be patient, responsible, and to appreciate life's simpler moments. I believe everyone needs a special friend like Mark in their life who will love you unconditionally and never abandon you no matter who you are or where you are. I always thought Mark and I would love each other forever and live that quiet life. But unexpectedly, when I was 20 years old, an event occurred that dramatically changed the relationship between Mark and me. It's a beautiful Sunday morning. As usual, Mark and I went for a walk in the park near our house. Mark likes walking like this. He ran around, breathed fresh air, and sometimes I stopped to smell the flowering bushes or watch the birds fly. I was always content and happy in such moments, enjoying the simple pleasures of life with my dear friend beside me. That delightful Sunday morning began like any other, with Mark and me indulging in our usual park walk. The dog was happy, bouncing, and moving about, sniffing the pleasant atmosphere. And then, something weird happened. Suddenly Mark stopped, all on hearing something, and fixed his gaze on a dog at a distance. It was a female Great Dane, golden as sunlight, majestic in stature and motion. He looked at her, and an invisible gravitational force attracted Mark toward her. His tail wagged furiously, and his limbs kicked off so fast that I lost my reaction time. I held tightly around Mark's neck, and it seemed like I had put my entire weight on him, but he was so strong that it didn't make an impact at all. He carried me along some distance, causing my stagger and almost fall. I called out Mark's name loudly, but nothing seemed to happen. He just made his way toward the other dog, as if the evidence in the world had shown that he had become associated with love at first sight. My heart was racing wildly, not knowing what to do, so in a moment of desperation, I just shouted, "Mark, stop." It was loud enough to jerk Mark. He stopped and turned, eyeing me with a confused and guilty expression. Only then did I feel the true sadness on his face. He stared at the ground, and his ears drooped as if he understood my grief at his actions. I had no choice other than to gently pull his leash and take him home. I sensed something eerie about Mark's demeanor on the way back. He would no longer run around free and wagging his tail happily, but walked quietly and slowly beside me. An unnameable feeling rose in my chest. I felt so sorry for Mark, guilty that I had scolded him. And what worried me more was whether our friendship would be the same from then on. That night Mark lay down quietly in the corner of the room with faraway eyes. Perhaps he was still thinking about the Great Dane he had met that morning. Coming closer, I petted Mark's soft fur and whispered gently, "Mark, for better or worse, I will love you always. But it's important that you listen to me. Do you understand?" Mark lifted his head and looked at me, his eyes sparkling as if to say that he did. A faint smile appeared on my face, hope still in my heart that nothing would come between us. Like always, I cuddled up with Mark as the night came. Mark was accustomed to curling up beside me. His measured breathing had always brought me peace. I stroked his back, caressing his silky fur as I always did before I went to sleep. But when I accidentally touched a certain spot, Mark let out a small moan as if he felt something strange. The moan was very soft, enough to startle me, but Mark continued to lie still, seemingly undisturbed. I gently withdrew my hand, my heart suddenly beating faster than usual. In that brief moment, I felt something strange, both confused and surprised. I lay still, watching the ceiling in the diffused light of the nightlight. Random thoughts were bubbling around my head as it was, and this made me restive. This certainly was not the first feeling of special closeness between Mark and me, but now it felt very strange. Curiosity was really taking a big toll on my heart because this new dynamic was something that left me lost in thought, trying to make it out for the both of us. As the night wore on, I had the growing sense that something had shifted between them, that Mark's behavior earlier, my reactions, had opened a door to emotions not as thoroughly pursued. The connection between us seemed deeper, more complex, and whatever was to happen, we would navigate it together. The next morning, I woke up to Mark already awake, staring at me with a mixture of loyalty and something else new understanding. Maybe. I smiled at him with a rejuvenated sense of purpose. "Good morning, Mark," I whispered as I ruffled his fur. "Today shall be a great day, okay?" Mark wagged his tail gently, almost agreeing with me. "As we begin our day, I know our relationship is stronger than ever, and whatever challenges come our way, we will face them together." I slowly got up from the bed and looked around. A stick lies on the ground in front of me. When I saw that, I felt an indescribable emotion in my heart, both nervous and happy. I sat up slowly, anxiety filling my heart as I stared at the tree. After a while, the mind slowly reached out as if controlling something. It seemed warm and indescribable. Every time I touched it, Mark shook a little. After a while, something stuck to my hand and flowed out. I looked up at Mark, who was still asleep. Not wanting to wake him up, I gently laid him on the bed and hugged him. That night I couldn't sleep right away. There was still a strange sense of emotion and excitement in my mind, as if a new door had opened between me and Mark. I didn't think Mark's instinctive response would make me feel any more special and deeply connected than before. He was not only a loyal dog but a complex human being with emotions and behaviors that I needed time to understand. That night, a strange feeling began to creep inside me, and it's hard to describe. Every time I look at Mark, my heart immediately beat faster. Meanwhile, the fiery pulse was beating even faster now. I don't look at Mark like that, not just as a dog or friend, but in a more special and deeper capacity. The feeling left me confused and excited, wondering what exactly was going on inside of me. Mark seemed to notice a difference in me as well. Every time I looked at him, his eyes were different. They look softer, be more considerate. It's like he's trying to read my thoughts. There were times when I caught Mark looking at me for long periods of time. His bright eyes were filled with an emotion I couldn't name. The relationship between us is already deep. Now it seems to have been thrust into a new meaning. One afternoon, Mark and I were sitting on the lawn, with the sunlight softly bouncing off the trees next to me. Mark rested his head on my thigh and closed his eyes half closed as if enjoying the peace of the moment. I reached out and stroked Mark's smooth fur, feeling the warmth radiating from the fur. But this time, instead of the usual perception, I felt like an electric current was running through my body. That simple connection suddenly shook me strangely. I bent down at Mark and gazed for a long while. He opened his eyes, his big brown eyes sparkling with an odd kind of knowing. At that moment, it felt like he was telling me something that neither of us could put into words, but both were aware of understanding. Mark's gaze confused me but at the same time produced a strange feeling of warmth. Until one day, everything went wrong. As it did. That day, my parents were out for the entire day, leaving just Mark and me at home alone. The house, which was always alive with laughter and warmth, was quiet now, a quiet that felt strange. It was Mark and me all alone in that huge space. That breath affected me in such strangeness, making me feel excited and weird, like something was about to happen. Mark lay beside me, his eyes tracking my every little move. It felt like he could almost sense the strangeness in the atmosphere that day. I didn't know why everything was so restless inside of me, but even with Mark's eyes always so soft and understanding, it felt as though they were just waiting for something. The house was dead still now, with only the ticking of the clock echoing in the air. Mark and I were sitting together in the living room, watching the screen flickering with light from a comedy movie. A very peaceful atmosphere enveloped us, with care for not much beyond the images flickering before our eyes. Suddenly, I saw Mark stand up, his eyes flashing with a strange intensity, as if he had just realized something important. Without a word of explanation, he hurried towards the main door. I heard a soft click and Mark had locked the door. He turned around, his eyes heavy with an intense emotion that was hard to name. Then, he quickly walked toward me. Before I could understand what was happening, Mark rushed over, pouncing on me, not giving me time to react. Space seemed to grow thick with the weight of something indescribable. Time seemed to pause, stunned into immobility. I felt as if I had been swept away by a cyclone that merged all barriers into each other. I took it for acquiring deep breath, leaning comfortably into the sofa. Mark was close to my feet, with one slight head resting on my knee. The TV light was shining brightly in Mark's eyes. Suddenly, I saw Mark stand up, his eyes shining with a strange color as if he had just realized something important. Without a word of explanation, he hurried towards the main door. While I was still wondering, there was a soft click sound. Mark had locked the door. He turned around, his eyes fastened with an intense emotion that was hard to name. And then he quickly walked towards me. Before I could understand what had happened, Mark sprang forward, pouncing upon me, not giving me a chance to react. The space seemed to suffocate. Time seemed to come to an end. Stunned, I froze. And all of a sudden, something like a whirlwind overran all the borders. That sudden feeling made me freeze, unable to react. Time seemed to stop. Space was suffocated by the rising tension. Everything around me began to blur into a haze, except the beating of my heart inside my chest. What happened afterwards was like a hurricane. It tore down all obstacles, all distances. I did not understand what had taken over Mark, nor did I know what to do then. But I knew only one thing for sure: what had just happened would alter my life forever. It was as if a door had opened, and it would not shut again. From then on, Mark and I were joined by an invisible string, a feeling not easy to describe, but one that haunts me to this very day. We never talked about what had happened, but every time our eyes met, I knew we were thinking of it. There was a quiet peace, One secret between us, smoldering in the silence of this home. The next time was easier. Naturality had taken its place, as if there had been an agreement or understanding in silence, and both knew where to begin from. Each time we walked into the room, with the door closed, Mark would approach me forcefully but also gently, as he reached out to me as if to affirm that I was his. I can't say I was totally opposed to it because a part of me craved that feeling, a feeling that was terrifying and exhilarating. Whenever Mark and I were together, I felt like I had forgotten everything around me. A wave of emotions flooded over me, causing me to panic and explode inside. It wasn't just physical contact. It was as if every cell in my body reacted to Mark's presence. My heart beat faster, my breathing became heavier, and I couldn't control my body's reactions. All anxiety, all thoughts of consequences, disappeared, leaving only that strong pull that Mark had generated. At times like this, I would sit and ask myself questions when the room would be quiet again. I knew what was happening was wrong, that my parents, the people who had always believed in us, would never accept it. But that feeling, that inexplicable feeling, I couldn't give up. It was like an addiction, something that made me more scared and more hungry. I kept all this to myself and always acted normal in front of my parents. Deep down I knew this relationship would never be known. One evening, as the sun began to set, spreading a warm light throughout the house, Mark and I found ourselves alone again, the house quiet, with the only sound being the distant hum of the refrigerator. Mark's eyes met mine, and at that moment I felt a surge of emotion. He walked towards me slowly. His steps were measured but sure. I felt the tension building. The air was thick with unspoken words. He met me and leaned his head towards my hand. His eyes never left mine. It was a time of pure connection. A silent understanding passed between us. In that quiet and private area, I felt a mix of emotions, guilt, excitement, and a deep, unspoken love. Mark's presence was both comforting and overwhelming. It is a reminder of the complex bond we share. I gently stroked his fur, feel the warmth of his body against mine. At that moment, all the worries in the world seemed to fade away. There were only two of us left in our private wildlife sanctuary. When days turned into weeks, our secret bond grew stronger. Every stolen moment, every shared look deepens our relationship. I find myself longing for the moment when we're alone, when I could stop acting and be with Mark. It was a dangerous game, one that could fall apart totally if discovered, but the longing for it was irresistible. Mark was much more than just a pet. He was my best friend, my bodyguard, and in many ways my soulmate too. Yet the weight of our secret had now begun to press heavily upon my heart. Everything we were doing felt so wrong. It completely went against what I was taught, but the feeling was too strong, too consuming to ignore. I found solace in the moments we shared, even as I grappled with the guilt and the fear of discovery. A tightrope walking over the edge of a precipice, but one I couldn't bring myself to stop. One day, while I sat watching Mark play in the yard, I realized our bond was much more than just temporary infatuation. It had, in fact, become more than an undying, unbreakable tie that no mortal, or anyone else for that matter. If this video gets 200 likes, I will publish part 2 of the video.